Supermarkets are a distinctly modern development. They have transformed our way of grocery shopping in just 60 years. Now, chain supermarkets are ubiquitous. They have promised better choice, cheaper prices and more jobs, but have they delivered? For years these ideas have gone unchallenged. They have influenced the framing of government legislation and a myriad of planning outcomes. But times are changing, and this is certainly true in the economics of today and the rise of green and sustainable philosophies. The underlying strengths of independent retailing are now being reasserted. The dangers of chains to their host communities are now beginning to be understood and recognised. This DVD is the first in a series produced by CIRR, a not-for-profit think tank focusing on the value propositions of independent retailing in Australia. This first episode introduces Dr. John Byram, an internationally recognised retail geographer and co-author of Britain's House of Commons All-Party Review on the impact of supermarket chains on the high street. He explains the British retail situation and provides valuable insights from the House of Commons which touch the Australian experience and resonate with issues here. A new way of thinking about chain supermarkets stems from the UK and begins here now.
The report showed that national chains can provide negative impacts for the communities in which they operate and for society as a whole. In terms of the sheer power, for instance, that the larger chains have, they're able to exercise that. As part of the evidence for the report, it was also suggested that in some instances, supermarkets were indulging in predatory pricing. When a major retailer established itself in a small town, for instance, it immediately offered a 40% discount to customers that were shopping within that particular supermarket. Now, clearly that is, given the margins that are involved in grocery retailing, that is below cost selling and is highly questionable behaviour. The purpose of the report, which was put together by the All-Party Parliamentary Small Shops Group, was to assess the current state of the small shop market in the United Kingdom and to assess the current trends that we might expect to develop going towards 2015. It was also a case of looking at what the costs of those trends might be, cost to society as well as to the economy, as well as to perhaps make recommendations, including recommendations for policy, including for the regulators as well. I was part of the project team that worked on the report. The report took oral evidence in the Palace of Westminster from around 25 different individuals and organisations, including major supermarkets, smaller supermarkets, pressure groups, trade associations and academics, amongst others. So I reviewed the oral evidence. I also reviewed the written evidence that was submitted as part of the inquiry. That written evidence came from around 100 different organisations, and essentially my role and those of the team, others in the team, was to review the oral and written evidence and to help compile the report. So the background to the report and the background to the work of the All-Party Parliamentary Group was essentially brought about by concern for the state of the retail sector in the UK. What we'd seen there was that over a number of years there'd been more and more consolidation. The larger chains had been getting even larger at the expense of the small shops. I mean, some estimates, for instance, were suggesting that 2,000 small shops were disappearing every year from the United Kingdom, and that was naturally a concern. So the downside of the power of the larger chains, especially in the retail sector, relate to issues such as access, principally access for those who do not have access to a car and so therefore cannot access supermarkets. We also see this benefits, for instance, in areas where one chain has higher than a 50% share or two chains dominate. And in those sorts of situations, it can be the case that benefits in terms of price are not realised by consumers. There's also the issue of retailers, small retailers, acting as the hubs, if you like, of communities. And when those hubs of the community, be that a small shop, a post office, whatever it might be, when that hub gets taken away due to the actions of a larger competitor and attention, say, shifts to an out-of-town location, then it can be argued that a lot of the social contact that goes on within a particular location can be lost. The report showed that there was certainly value that was added by the presence of independent retailers, by the presence of small shops in UK communities. So, for instance, for, let's say, £100,000 worth of turnover, a small shop will employ more people than the equivalent larger shop will employ for £100,000 worth of turnover. Small shops are also drivers of innovation. So in terms of moving into, let's say, new products and offering new products, frequently it is small shops that have been the instigators of that. If we think of, for instance, specialty bread products, which have now become mainstream in national chain supermarkets, often those bread and bakery products started off in small independent retailers.
Are these UK findings relevant to the Australian conditions? We asked independent retailer John Cummings. John owns and operates independent supermarkets in Western Australia and is chairman of NAGA, the National Association of Retail Grocers of Australia.
Without doubt, that is what is occurring. You just have to look at the statistics that came out of the research that we had done, and it shows that in Australia, where the independent sector has as little as 20% of the grocery market, they actually employ 57% of the jobs in that industry. Well, let's go back to a simple little thing with that. If you look at one of the major chains in Australia, in 5 years from 2001, they actually increased their revenue by 75%. At the same time, they cut the number of people they employed in Australia by 27%. That meant 35,592 jobs went out of that business as their sales went up by 75%. The chains are, of course, big business. Large public companies today are all about maximising profits. That's what the game is. In the past, these companies, when they haven't got competition, have put their prices up. They've done it in the past, they'll do it in the future. There's no doubt about it. They charge what the market will allow them to.
In the next episode of CIRR's Dangers of Chains DVD, British MPs explain the problems for the UK communities confronted with unabated expansion of chain supermarkets and the lessons for Australia to consider.